Hey guys, welcome to Paul Ricard, the most exciting track on the circuit. I don't think there is anyone who will argue that point. It is more interesting than Spa, has more character than Brands Hatch. I mean, there's just something for everyone, and no track anywhere in the world has as many vertigo stripes on it. So it wins, pure and simple. So let's talk about it, shall we? Let's do. Okay, so the one thing I'll say about I think one of the things that about prep on this track because there's really no danger on it, right? You've really got to try pretty hard to kill yourself on this track. Um, and like we just finished up Laguna Seca, I spent the vast majority of my week just doing nothing but working on running long stints and working on consistency because death is but a sausage curb away at all times. That's simply not the case here at Paul Ricard. So I'll spend a lot more of the week working on speed. Um, and less time working on consistency than I would on balance at a more dangerous track. The one thing you'll have to watch for, I would suggest, when you're doing your practice and doing your long runs, make sure you have your track limits under control because obviously there are plenty of them here to crop up and bite you in the ass. But beyond that, it's I know it's not everybody's favorite track, but I think it's a really good track to race on. Especially when you have a good sized field. So so we'll run through it and see what we can find. The This first sequence of corners, turns one and turn two. The key for me is essentially this position right here. These are dependent corners, right? So what you do in turn one massively affects what happens to you in turn two. You've got a good size straight following turn two, which means you want to maximize your exit coming out of turn two so that you can maximize your speed on the subsequent straight. And as a result, that affects what I choose to do as far as my entry and exit in turn one, because that's where my compromise is going to occur. So my breaking point is just coming up on the 100-meter board. I think you probably want to get your car right over into the cones on the right-hand side in order to open this up as much as possible. How soon you get over is I think is a little bit debatable because I think it depends on the car that you're driving. Let me see if I can find. It's it's a little bit hard to see on this. I think there's a little bit more of a raise or a rise to this curbing, the red and white striped curbing on the right-hand side than what there really appears. I don't think it impacts your braking too much, but I do think some cars, particularly the McLaren, is where I've experienced it in. You can easily bottom out the nose on your entry here under braking on this curb. So the Lambo I put it in the same category, but not quite as bad as what I felt with the McLaren. So I feel like I can be a little bit more aggressive in the Lamborghini with it, but some cars you do have to be cautious. Like in a perfect world, I'd have the car already fully over to the right side, just covering this red and white striped curbing to set up for the braking. In the McLaren, I think you have to be very cautious, and as you can see in the Lambo, I come over to it pretty late to try to minimize any chance of that bottoming the nose out. So just watch that if you're in a car where you feel like you're getting some bottoming out on the nose. Either adjust your ride height to compensate for it, or adjust your line and come into it a little bit later. But regardless, you want to get in here nice and wide under braking. I prefer to drop down to second gear when I take turn one. I know some people like third gear, particularly I think in the Porsche. I think there's a good chance you'll be in third gear through here, but I like second, and the reason is that it helps me to pull the nose fully inside on my exit, so that I come out of here closer to the middle of the track. Regardless of what gear you use, I think the compromise has to be the exit of turn one. If you allow yourself, either by trying to brake too deeply or by trying to carry too much speed into turn one, if you take that approach, it's going to put you much farther to the right and closer to the curb on your exit of turn one, which is exactly where you don't want to be, in my opinion, because that's going to close down turn two. It's going to force you to delay. It's going to force you to overslow the car going into turn two. And delay you getting back onto the throttle, which is going to compromise the straight coming after it. So, whatever approach you decide to take, I think the line has to put you towards the middle of the track on the exit of turn one. Um, as far as the entry goes into turn two, there's one thing I want to bring up here, because and it's not something I've ever talked about on any of these deep dives, but I think there are times when it can be important. And this corner and another one coming up, something like, I think it's turn 8 or something along those lines, right before you go onto the Mistral straight. How do I put this? Okay, so what you're going to see me do is you're going to see me do a full lift, upshift to third, and then go back hard on the throttle when I make my transition right here. Okay. Okay, what I think is very easy to do, what I think is an easy habit to get into, when you make that transition from left to right at that point, is to do a partial lift off of the throttle, whether you're in second or third gear. I think it's easy to do a partial lift where you're somewhere between like 30% and 50% of throttle. Here's the problem that can create for you when you do that. And we need to talk a little bit about the internal mechanics of ACC for this to make any kind of sense, and specifically we got to talk about the differential. If you've never studied the differential to understand how it works, the real brief TLDW on it is that when the differential is in an open position, the rear wheels are able to turn independently of each other. When it is in a closed position, both of the wheels are locked together and have to turn at the same rate. Okay. When you are going through a corner, certainly through the meat of a corner, you would much rather have the differential in an open setting, because as you're going through the tightest portion of the corner, you want them to be able to turn independently, so that the inside wheel can turn a little bit slower and the outside wheel can turn a little bit faster, and that helps the car to rotate. Okay, if you hit the meat of a corner, and you have them both locked together where they're turning at the same rate, that is going to have a tendency to produce understeer and push you out farther wide, right? Now, we really don't know exactly how the differential works in ACC from the standpoint of is it ever, fully open? Is it ever fully closed? Or is it simply variations of that theme up and down a scale, right? Eris has never got into significant detail on that, and I don't know of anyone else who has either to know exactly when that happens, right? So I think it's safer to think of it as, okay, look, when you're fully off the throttle, that is as close to a completely open differential as you're going to get. And when you're fully on the throttle, that is as close to a fully locked differential as you're going to get. Where exactly it is at anywhere in between, I don't think we know, and I don't think we can find out unless Kunos or Eris really decides to do a deep dive on that issue. What I do know is that if you watch, in particular, Niels Najax, because he goes into more detail on this than anyone else that I've ever seen, and if you watch Motec data, then what you will see is that depending on the car and the preload setting and that sort of thing, somewhere around, let's say the 30% to 60% throttle range, right? The differential will at least begin to lock, and you'll have the tires turning together at a much more consistent speed, thereby promoting understeer, right? And the reason I bring that up is that when you have corners like this, where you're transitioning into turn 2, it is very easy to leave that roughly 30 to 50% level of throttle on it as you make the transition right here. Okay, so you'll see me go full throttle right here and then back out of it, and it's very common to see people only throttle back to about right here as they wait for the car to turn before they then go back to full throttle. The danger of that is that that you are at a point where you're beginning to lock the differential and potentially creating understeer into the corner at the point when you want it to rotate the most. Okay, so if that starts happening, you'll feel like you're going too fast, right? And back off of the throttle even more. When in fact that's not the case at all, that it's actually the differential that is giving you trouble as opposed to the actual speed that you have at that particular moment. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind in this corner when you're going through your laps, and think about what that's doing to the car, and it'll come up again in a few more corners. So what I do as far as my approach on this corner is to take away that disadvantage that the differential can give you, and instead try to use it to my advantage. Okay, so instead, as soon as I'm ready to really make the turn into the corner, I come off of the throttle completely. Now the differential is in a completely open setting and the wheels are free to move independently. That's going to give me the greatest amount of rotation that I can get as I go through the apex, right? And then when I go back on the throttle, I'm going to try to go back on the throttle very hard, because what I want to do is now I want to lock the differential, but lock it hard and fast, which unlike when you only have 30 to 50% throttle, this creates just a slight amount of oversteer, right? And I use the differential to make the last bit of turn in the corner to get that last bit of rotation. So watch that throttle trace and think about the differential, opening and then slamming closed creating just a little bit of rotation, and I'm hoping that will make some sense to you. This is, unless this is something you ever practiced before or worked with before, it's going to feel pretty awkward to you, I would imagine. But based upon the mechanics of how the game works and the differential works, it's absolutely a viable strategy and can remove that problem the differential creates there mid corner. Okay, so just food for thought on that. But that's why I take this corner exactly the way that I take it. Okay, the next sequence of turns, what would it be? 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I guess, probably. Yeah, something like that. Okay, where do we want to start this? Okay, so whatever you do, this point right here has to be your priority, right? Because you're about to come up onto the Mistral Strait, and you must maximize your advantage out of turn 6 here, in order to maximize your speed onto the 1,000 kilometer long straight. So whatever it is that you decide to do in these previous corners, because they're all leading one into another, right? Keep in the back of your head that whatever you choose to do, you cannot compromise what you ultimately decide to do right here on turn 7, because this is the most important part. You've got to be back on the throttle as soon and as hard as you possibly can. That's got to be your priority. Otherwise, you're absolutely going to be losing time down the unbelievably long straight. Okay, so backing up to turn 3. I don't want to do this. You you've kind of got to make compromises all over the place. So let me just walk you through the line that I take through all of this. I'm going to get my left wheels all the way out here to the left onto the blue, and then right at the 100-meter board is where I'm going to go on the brakes. The I am not slamming the brakes here. This is much more of a progressive application of the brakes, because I don't want to upset the back end too much here. And I will take this in second gear. This is another one that I think a lot of people may choose to take in third gear, and I have no issue with that, so long as you're able to control your exit out of this enough so that you don't put yourself in a bad position on the next left-hander. But for me, I'm going to take it in second gear because I think it makes it easier to pull the nose into the right and keep the car a little bit more towards the center of the track. So you can see that I trail brake right up to the apex of the corner. Depending on how much speed I carry through there, sometimes I'll come in a little bit hotter. I mean, there's always variation in your laps, If I've scrubbed off just a little bit too much speed, you'll see me give it just a squirt of gas right here. Sometimes I come in hot enough that I cannot and should not do that, and I'll just have a little brief coast phase here before I go back on the brakes. It's a very quick transition over to the left. You don't have a lot of time, It's just straighten the wheel and then come back onto the brakes again. This is also a corner where if you are a little bit newer, you'll probably want to drop down into first gear in order to make it a little bit easier on yourself. I prefer to keep it in second because I don't want to bleed any more speed than I absolutely have to. That makes it a little bit trickier, it really does. But even if you drop down into first gear here, I think I would, depending on the car, if you get back on the throttle here and this curbing is causing you trouble with the back end getting loose, then I would suggest dropping down into first, but then doing a short shift up into second gear to remove some of the torque from the engine. And I think that'll probably help you on the exit here. Okay. Obviously, track limits this is one of the places where track limits is a big concern. So be very mindful of the line that you take. So I'm going to wait for the car to make a little bit of a turnaround here, and then I'm going to get hard back on the throttle. Since I'm in second gear, that lets me go pretty hard on this curb without the back end getting too loose, although it will slide around on me a little bit. I may have to make some setup adjustments to try to improve that. But when I come out here, I want to come out center left, right? You don't want to come out of that corner too far to the right, or once again, you're going to compromise your entry into the upcoming right-hander. So I want to be over here to the left side, and then going essentially straight back onto the brakes. Now, here is this is one of the corners where I think there's a really big danger of creating false oversteer here, because the combination of you going back onto the brakes and you having to turn into this corner comes so close together that if this isn't something that you're paying attention to and really try to practice your way out of it, this is going to be a problem for you, because you're going to run yourself right into oversteer. I think I did it a little bit here. Yeah. So see how I'm almost 90 degrees over with the wheel, and I'm still at probably 80% brake pressure. That is what's going to create the understeer, because I am overdoing the available grip on the front tires, and the car is simply not going to turn until I come off of the brakes a little bit more, right? So my suggestion to you, and this is one of the things that I'm working on this lap to really get the timing and the feel of everything down properly, is when you come out of this left-hander and you go onto the brakes for the right-hander, start experimenting with using less brake pressure initially. Okay, that will buy you some room to play with. So you definitely shouldn't be going, full brake where the ABS is kicking in and all of that. If you're doing that, you're almost certainly using too much brake pressure, and you're going to absolutely force yourself into to this understeer that I'm talking about. So experiment with using a little bit less initial brake pressure right here at this point. So that when you turn the wheel, which you have to do immediately, you're giving yourself a little bit of room for the wheels to be able to grip up and turn instead of running into this understeer. What I do here is not bad. I mean, I start coming off of the and trail braking immediately thereafter. It's just the timing isn't quite perfect, and it's a small example of what will become a bigger problem for you if you're not very conscious of it. The curbing here on both the apex and the exit can be problematic as far as the grip on the rear end. There are some cars where it will be easier than others. The Lambo can get a little bit squirrely on it. So if you're struggling with that in your car, I think you might want to consider maybe softening up the rear end, or otherwise looking for a little bit more rear end grip somewhere, because you don't want to be. This is where you don't want to be sacrificing anything, because you really want to be able to set up properly for for turn 6 here, because because it's critical, right? Okay, so this is the other corner that I was talking about, where the issue with the differential can create a problem for you, right? Because it's very easy to release the throttle here, but either release it to that 30 to 40% range, or to pick it up too early and just hold that 30 to 40% range, right? Which means that you're going to create understeer again. Excuse me. Which means you're going to lock the differential, and create that understeer that prevents the car from turning at the moment when you need it to turn the most, right? So this is the other corner that I was talking about, where that can happen. So you'll see that I use essentially the exact same approach, right? Really focus on doing a full lift in order to allow the differential to open, the wheels turn independently. I get the maximum rotation out of the car at the moment when I need it, and then as soon as I've got that rotation, I slam the throttle, lock the differential, get that just slight bit of oversteer, hopefully, and complete that last bit of rotation, and go full throttle from there. So let's go full speed so you can see that in action, actually coming through turn 6. Watch that again, and because I don't think you can see it in slow motion, but watch how much the instant that I lift off of the throttle, when I go the full lift, right? Watch how much the wheel and the car are able to rotate just at that instant, because I think it's actually easier to see here than it is in turn 2. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, let me think. What else do I want to... I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about on this sequence of corners. So, so maximum track width here. Get on the brakes, but don't be too aggressive on them, and start coming off of them relatively early. That'll allow the car to rotate. I'll take second gear here to stay out to the right, and then a quick dab at the brakes to throw it back into the inside. Wait for the car to rotate enough so that I can slam back onto the throttle, and then get it center left here, and then a relatively gentle application of the brake, and start coming off of it quickly so that the car is able to rotate to the right. Again, wait for it to clear the curb just enough so that I can get back hard on the throttle, get the car settled down, and then I'll turn it in, and then right about here is where I'll go for the full lift, let the car rotate just enough, and then slam the throttle back down. And then I'm off to the races as far as the straight goes, right? I'll try to work back over here to the right, but it's not at all critical that you get all the way over, because there is plenty of room in order to negotiate this left here, and just catch a little bit of the curb and shorten your line through there. So you don't have to worry about getting all the way back over to the right. Okay, the tricky part of the Mistral Straight is obviously the sheer amount of time that's involved in traversing it. The best recommendation that I can give you is, when you go to race on this track, is to bring a good book with you, right? Um, I think it's important that you stay engaged with what you're doing because it's entirely too easy to fall asleep on this straight. So if you have a good book that you can knock out a couple of chapters, per lap, I think that that is super helpful. If you're not a reader, maybe have your laptop open, play a couple of games of solitaire, whatever it is that you prefer. You're a sim racer, which means you probably haven't spoken to your mom in about 3 or 4 years. Give her a call, tell her you love her, right? Mom, I'm on the Mistral straight. I've got a half hour to kill, and I just wanted to say I love you, right? It's a great time to knock out some of those things that you often just don't get around to in normal life. So that's how you handle the Mistral straight. I would say do your taxes, but they were due last week, so if you haven't, you're fucked anyway. So okay, turn 10. Is a pure aerodynamic balance corner, right? It's incredibly high speed. And if you are not respectful of the aerodynamic balance of the car when you go on the brakes at your entry to this corner, you are going to spin it, pure and simple. You're also going to spin it if you drive a Porsche. So I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. This corner is a roll of the dice every time you come through it in the Porsche, and that's what you get for choosing to drive it. But if you're driving a normal car that at least stands a legitimate chance of being able to maintain its balance coming into this corner, my braking point for it is just as I cross over a little bit past the 100-meter board, is when I go onto the brakes. And the key here is that you've got to be gentle on the brake here, right? The worst thing you can do at this point is to nosedive the car, upset the rear end of it as you begin your turn in, because that's exactly where the spin is going to come from. So it has to be a gentle application of the brake in order to maintain the aerodynamic platform, in order to maximize the amount of aerodynamic grip that you have. What my goal is to be back onto the throttle before or by the time I hit the yellow pylon here. Okay, so I'm looking to get the car turned and positioned before I reach that point. I think it's really easy to get carried away with trying to carry too much speed through this corner, and you're going to wind up having to coast for a very long time and really wait to get back on the throttle until you're somewhere in this range or even beyond. Um, I want to be back on the throttle early enough that I have absolutely no choice but to be trying to steer the car uh, to the right to avoid getting the off track warning here. Right, that's the level of speed I want to be carrying when I'm doing my exit of the corner. So in a way, I'm far more concerned with my exit speed than I am with my pure entry speed. Your entry speed is going to be fast regardless, and whether you brake just a little bit earlier, or a little bit later, or a little bit easier, a little bit harder, you're not substantially going to affect the amount of time you gain or lose in that early portion of the corner at the entry. Where you are going to have a bigger impact is the amount of speed you're able to carry on the exit itself, because you have a decent amount of straight line that you're going to have to carry here, and you want to maximize that. So let's go. Let's go up above. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So the car is now at this point is completely turned um, and and placed in a position where I can now go full throttle, right? Um, and with really little danger of running into a track limits issue on the inside, because that's obviously going to be a concern, during the race. The inside track limits violation is not something that I worry about too much here, because my entry is wide enough that even if I am a little bit to the inside here, I can easily make an adjustment to the outside and be perfectly fine, right? So that lets me catch the apex as close as humanly possible and still be back on the throttle very early. And when I say that I want to be forced onto the outside here, I mean that there are times when, like if you're not carrying enough speed on this exit, you could keep the car more onto the track, and you simply go out to the left by choice. And I think you'll understand what I'm talking about when you say that. You want to be in a position where you are struggling in a way where it's where it you have to bring the car back to the right, otherwise you're going to get a track violation on the left-hand side. That's where I'm trying to get to as far as my exit speed. Now, will I be a bit more careful about that during the race than I am when I'm just doing quali or hot lapping? Absolutely. I'll build in just a little bit of a buffer. But the point is, you need to know where that limit is for you and go hunting for it in order to maximize your time around this track. Let's see. Okay, this this next corner, turn 11, I think is probably the most difficult corner on the track, and the one that is the hardest to get right, and certainly the hardest to get correct consistently. The way I treat this is as one massive double apex corner, right? So, if you're talking about a standard, double apex hairpin, of which there are tons of examples, you're going to take one early apex, allow the car to drift out wide mid corner, and then catch another apex on your exit, and you're going to V the corner off, right? That is the approach that I'm taking with this. It's just, gigantor size is all it is. So from a line standpoint, I'm looking to start out as wide as possible, and you'll see that on the, let's go to the inside, because once I get the car under control on the exit of 10, I'm going to be all the way out here to the left, and I'm just going to keep the car out here, right? Now, for me, the brake marker is this light pole on the right-hand side. Essentially, call it maybe close to halfway between this light pole and the two that are up there closer to the apex of the corner. So I have a bit of a mental stopwatch going off in my head that when that passes out of my peripheral vision, that is when I'm getting onto the brakes. So I'm going to come from the left here, start turning the car in so that I can catch the first apex. That allows me to come in pretty straight at this point. And the whole trick to this corner, to really getting time through this corner, is being able to carry enough speed into the second half of the corner, because it is incredibly easy to get yourself into a position where you have overslowed the car and you're forced to pick up the throttle at some point around here in the second half of the corner. it's really really hard to get this right, where you carry the maximum amount of speed through the first half of the corner, so that all you're trying to do at this point is slow down enough to make the second. Right? It sucks, coped. It's the worst part. So as I've talked about before, my goal in every corner, what I'm always striving for, is to carry just a little bit too much speed into the corner and then adjust down from there with the brakes. Right? That is particularly difficult to do on this corner because the rear end is under a lot of pressure. Right? It's your absolute weak link in this corner. And it's incredibly easy to get that back end moving around on you and lose a ton of time. So what you do on the brakes for your entry into this corner becomes absolutely critical. And what you will do if you are either newer or just struggling with this corner is, because you know that the back end is going to be a squiggly nightmare once you get in here, you will over brake and over slow the car right here at this point, right? Because that is going to give you a calm enough car that you are comfortable through this middle portion of the corner. The problem is that by doing that, you're going to be losing time. This is where you run into the problem where at this point you're probably going to have to pick up the throttle a little bit because you've started going too slow, right? So there's no easy solution to this other than practice. So let's go. It's seeing what I'm doing on the brakes is the most important part of this in being able to attempt to replicate this type of approach to the corner. You'll notice that that I do not go to 100% on the brakes here, right? I'm just kind of creeping up to brake pressure and then backing off on it as quickly as I feel like I can, because I don't want to overslow the car. I want to carry as much speed as I can in there, right? Now I'll just go into this long coasting phase where the coasting itself is slowly draining off the pace that I'm carrying, and then let's see, that's what, 2/3 of the way through the corner, I think, roughly. I wish we were able to do the true overhead view so I could see exactly where this is into the corner, but certainly past the halfway point, maybe rough close to 2/3 of the way through the corner is where I will shift down to second gear, but that always varies depending on how well I've executed the first half of the corner. Sometimes I have to grab it a little bit sooner, sometimes a little bit later. It just depends on how well I've executed. But if I have done it right, and I mostly did on this attempt, then from here on out, my eyes are over to the second apex on the exit that I'm going to be taking, and mentally calculating where I am in relation to that and whether I'm carrying enough speed. And this is where you'll see me do very slight adjustments on the brake just to bleed off a little bit more speed. Right? Because I'm just going a tiny bit too fast in order to put the car where I want it. At this point, as soon as I get close enough, I'm able to go back to full throttle. So I want to be back on full throttle by the time I reach my second apex. The only way you can do that is if you have allowed the car to drift out far enough mid-corner and held it there so that you can take a more come in wider and take a more direct line into this second apex. If you allow the car to come in too tight, generally by overslowing the car at the entry or mid corner, then you are going to force yourself too far to the inside, and you're really going to have to wait. You're going to have to wind up steering around these sausage curbs at the apex before you're able to get back on full throttle. So my goal is, before I get to that point, I want to be back on full throttle, and that wide, middle part of the corner is what allows me to do that in combination with carrying enough speed. But it's hard. It's absolutely very, very difficult to do, and to do consistently. It's a feel thing every single time. So let's back up and look at that at full speed. And I can tell you that at the entry point through the first half of the corner, I'm absolutely kind of dancing on the knife edge as far as the back end goes. It's the only way to do it in order to maximize your speed through that corner. But when you get it right, it really feels like you're just slingshotting out of this corner. So it's fantastic, but it'll take some work. Okay. Okay, turn 12 is honestly, I think you've got options here. I really do. Um, it is essentially a hairpin. Not quite 180 degrees, I don't think, but it's essentially a hairpin. Um, and I think that it is at a radius. So let's think of your standard very tight hairpins like you'll see at the first turn of a lot of tracks. The radius of those are small enough that that a single apex, late apex approach is always going to be the best way to go about doing it, right? And then you get into some of the larger radius hairpins where a double apex becomes more obviously advantageous, right? This one I think is right in that gray area where either a single apex approach or a double apex approach works. So I don't really care which one you use, so long as it suits the car you drive and your style. I personally prefer a single apex on this one. So as soon as I make the exit out of turn 11, I'll swing the car as far as I can over to the right in order to open up the entry. But I am not aiming for a first early apex on this one. I'm going to brake deep into the corner, let the car rotate, catch a late apex, and get back onto the throttle early. That's my goal here. I suppose, if anything, you could even call this a hybrid, between between a single and a double apex, because it's not a traditional single apex in the sense where I'm doing a fairly geometric entry line. It really is, in a way, closer to a V shape that I am doing with this corner, but the difference is that my entry apex is offset away from the curb farther. You'll see me do the same thing in the second to the last corner. So it may be actually more correct to say that my approach here is sort of a hybrid double apex. And I wonder if an outside view will show that a little bit better. I use this approach on this corner in large part because I really want to minimize my time and risk on this curb because the Lamborghini doesn't handle it very well. So this little bit wider approach, and I'll call it a hybrid approach, makes it easier for me to get back on the throttle on my exit while avoiding either mostly or entirely this curb right here. When I try to do this corner as a legitimate straight up double apex, I find that it is entirely too easy and common for me to get the nose inside too soon as I'm coming around the middle of the corner, which puts the front end too far up onto to this apex and totally destabilizes the car. I've either got to wait on it or, I'm really just going to start spinning all over the place if I get back onto the throttle too soon. So that's why I've chosen this approach that I'm taking here. But if you can make a legitimate double apex work at that corner, knock yourself out because I think it's absolutely viable. Okay, so as we get up to turn 14, let's see, I've already foreshadowed what it is that I do here. So I'll call it another hybrid double apex that I take here, where the overall shape of what I'm doing is more of a V, but my entry apex is away from the curb itself. So kind of somewhere in the middle there between a single and a double apex. Okay, one of the things that lets me do, right? And the reason why I like this approach on this corner. One, I feel like it lets me carry plenty of speed through the middle of the corner, but also it puts me in a really good position here at the exit where I can pretty confidently attack this curb a little bit when I'm on my exit, because you know as well as I do how easy it can be to get up here onto this curb. And either get too far onto it where it causes a track limits violation, or to let the back end get squirrely because it's moving around. By coming in a little bit wider there, when I'm turned enough, I can go back pretty heavy on the throttle at this point without clipping too much of that curb, and puts the car in a pretty good position, I think, coming off of it. So yeah, that's my approach on that one. What I will say about the exit is, I'm going to throw a caveat for the final turn here. I'm going to throw a caveat in that that I'm not positive about this, because there's no question that that based on everything that I tend to think about positioning and choices and all of that, that that you're about to go onto the front straight, which means you would absolutely want to maximize, your exit on it, right? Okay, pretty straightforward. And by that logic, it means that your priority should be to get the car as far over to the left here as possible so that you can open up your entry onto it and maximize that exit, right? I mean, that's the way it seems to work. The problem is I don't think that works very well here. And the only reason I can think of is because there the in this very specific case, the trade-off doesn't work very well, right? So, oops. So let's say you wanted to maximize your exit out of the last turn, right? And in order to do so, you want to be as far to the left as possible when you go to begin your entry to the corner, right? Well, in order to accomplish that, that means you would have to sacrifice a lot of this corner. And I think what the problem is, and this is where I wish I could really see the geometry of the corner from a legitimate overhead view, because that's as close as we can get. It's just not a good enough view of the geometry of the corner. I feel like the radius of the corner is changing, and it's making that normal approach impractical, I suppose is the word that I would use. Yes. And I'm not sure if it's that once you get later in the corner that the radius starts to open up a little bit, which doesn't allow you to get the car tucked in as deeply and as hard as you would want to if you were trying to maximize a left side of the track exit. But it's something along those lines that I think is creating the problem, because you can't come straight off of this curb, right? You can't just attack this curb right now in order to get all the way over there to the left, because you're going to get a track limits violation if you do, which means you have to stay a little bit further to the right than you want to, um, and I think to the extent that you tried to make a compromise early in the corner in order to achieve a left side exit, that winds up costing you more than what you lose by coming off a little bit closer to the center of the track here. I think that's the best way that I can explain it. What experience tells me should work here, and how the compromise should be made, does not work on this sequence right here. So that's the best I can give you. If now, to the extent that you are able to, keep to the left and get to the left in order to open up this corner without sacrificing too much in this last turn, do whatever you can. I'm not saying don't make the attempt to get to the left and stay to the left, but I think the typical compromise of really making the sacrifice in order to get far to the left on this exit doesn't work nearly as well as it does in the vast majority of other corner combinations. So that's why you'll see me have a tendency to come off much closer to the center of the track here, and then try to work my way just a little bit back to the left as much as I can. So this corner is a violation of what I would generally consider to be a pretty hard and fast rule. Okay, So when you do make your exit, though, this is another corner where I think you have to be very careful about breaking yourself into understeer, right? Because just like we saw on the combination of what is it, turns three, three, four. I think the entry to turn five. So the entry to turn five, right? Exit of turn four, entry to turn five. Same thing here on the exit of turn 14 and entry of turn 15. Um, you have a very, very short transition window here from the left to the right, and you're going to be going straight from a hard throttle application into a relatively hard brake application, where you have to immediately start turning the wheel in order to negotiate the hairpin. So what does that mean? That means the threat of you braking too hard and turning too hard too soon is going to push you straight into oversteer, because you are overcoming the available grip of the front wheels. So be mindful of that as you do this, and either brake a little bit softer when you do go into the brakes in order to buy yourself a little bit of wiggle room on the grip. Or if you do brake hard, be conscious that you need to come off of that heavy braking almost immediately, because you're going to have to start turning the wheel immediately. Let's see how I did it, how well I did it here. Yeah, see, that's probably too hard since I did this lap. See, there you go again, full brake, and I'm already almost at 90 degrees. That is overdone. And I think since I did that this lap yesterday, I've started making that adjustment where I'm braking just a little bit softer at the beginning of the braking phase here to this corner, to make it easier to manage this potential understeer right here, because the car doesn't really start turning until I come off of the brakes, so that's the understeer kicking in there. But otherwise, that's the lap. I mean, Paul Ricard. And let's double check the time. 54.252. That's my best lap so far. I'm hoping I'm going to keep playing with it and see if I can break into the 53s at some point this week. But we'll see. We're certainly getting. I'm definitely close to the limit of what my current skill level is going to be able to achieve. But I'm hoping I can break that into the 53s at some point this week. We'll see. Let's go full speed. And that's it. Good luck this week, guys. I'll see you on the practice server, and with any luck, it'll rain, and we'll just make Paul Ricard as miserable of an experience as possible this week. But otherwise, take care. I'll see you later.